NextGen Industrialist podcast, where we dive deep into the forces shaping the future of industry, from advanced manufacturing to industrial automation, AI, machine learning, resilient supply chains. I am your host, Belinda Ephraim, founder of Catalyst Point and Tensor VZ. Today, we are challenging everything you think about manufacturing. Our guest started by cutting wires for 25 cents an hour in her family's business. Now she's running a multi-million dollar electronics manufacturing company that's redefining what made in America means in an AI driven world. Karla, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All right.
Before we begin, I want to thank you so much for spending quality time with me.
Mhm.
This is a real privilege for me to invite people into conversation.
Yeah.
When I do these things, I always liken my interviews to the indigenous African traditions of storytelling in community. I'm going to start, but before I do, I want you to know that you are in absolute control. You can choose to not answer a question or answer the questions any way that you want to. Karla, there is quite a story arc between 25 cents an hour working on your family business to now running a multi-million dollar electronics manufacturing company.
Mhm.
Can you take us back to your origin story? What was your first memory on the factory floor?
So there was no factory floor. It was actually a kitchen table. My family, we live in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and my father was an engineer. My mother was a systems analyst, and my father's company, they were acquired, and that the place that he was working, and they decided that they no longer wanted to do instrumentation. So he was out of a job. And randomly someone asked them, hey, you know, manufacturing and electronics, can you build these cables for us? And he said, sure, I'm not doing anything until I get to my next step. And he built those cables in the kitchen. And I was in elementary school at the time, and I came home and said, what are you doing? He said, building cables. I wanted to help. So I simply sat down with a ruler and wire cutters and helped cut wire for that 25 cents an hour. Ultimately, um, most children who see their families start a business realize I do not want to live like that. That is not going to be
Mm.
my life. And I wound up going to school to study business logistics. I wanted nothing to do with manufacturing. And I worked in corporate America out of college. And every once in a while, I would come in and help the family do some project, or between moving from one business to another, I may come in and do help with a government project or certification. But for the most part, my interests were not in manufacturing. And I think it was because college was always taught that as the way to have a beautiful future. And then you go on and you have corporate career and you all fight for the C-suite. And that's what I did. I was programmed to do that. And then it wasn't until later in life that I realized and learned that small business is the economic engine of our country. And in fact, family business is the economic engine of our entire world. And once I started learning how that worked, I realized that I was letting go of a legacy. And so my mind was changed. I had children. I was thinking differently. So life kind of changed. And I realized that for us, I needed to put my time, talent, and treasure in the family business. One part, though, is that, working with your parents it's very difficult. They see you as a child, no matter how old you are. And my father always taught me that people go into business with people who have something to offer. Earlier in my career, I had nothing to offer. He was telling me and teaching me everything I needed to know. But coming in with corporate experience, I also happened to start an e-commerce business, which is another story for another time. But because of those experiences and because of the way the world was changing, I was able to show him how business now, how marketing now worked in an online platform where you didn't have to go door to door anymore. You now were being stalked from afar before a potential customer would approach, or even if it was word of mouth, people were looking for you behind the scenes. My e-commerce business, coupled with the large companies that I worked for, I had a deeper understanding for how things were moving and the way that things were shifting, and I was able to offer that to our small family business. And
Hmm.
in working together, we, I said I would love to come in and take over the family business.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Listening to you, I've your story arc closely resonates with mine.
Really?
Yes, because my parents were manufacturers of building products, fittings and fixtures,
Okay.
and in West Africa. And so they distributed, manufactured and distributed between West Africa and Europe.
Mm.
And I want, at a young age, you didn't quite understand, but you were like, I don't know if that's what I want to do.
Right. It doesn't look
um,
great, right?
yeah, yeah. And can you talk about that resistance that a lot of us who grew up in family owned business environments experience? That sort of like
Yeah.
friction.
Well, there's a lot of things that come to play.
Mhm.
Our parents did well so that we could do better than them.
Yes.
So we've had educational experiences that our parents may not have had. We are around communities or part of environments that they may not have had. They introduce themselves to it, but they've become native to us. So for my parents, they may not have known anybody who owned a business. But for me, I
Mhm.
knew a lot of people whose families owned businesses. I knew people who took over their family business without going the corporate route. And then I know those who have gone the corporate route and decided, I'm never going to take over my family business. Then there's people like myself who do join. So I was able to have access to different conversations that I know that my parents didn't have access to. So we
Mhm.
lived in two different time periods in two different worlds.
Yeah.
And that friction that exists is that friction between duty, because you should take over your family business. It's the right thing to do. And then there's the friction, that other side of that is that's working against is I want to make my own life and follow my own passions. And your family may be doing construction fixtures or electronics manufacturing, and that's not the world that you really want to be a part of.
Right.
We're in the same general age bracket where this whole generation was told to follow your dreams and find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And it's not really like that in family business. It's a sense of, we've built this thing that, especially as Black people, we've built this company, and there's no one really that looks like us that does what we do. Why would you not? Why would you want to work for someone else and not help
Mm.
and carry the baton and move forward? So there's a lot of guilt associated with it. I would say my one brother calls it a sense of duty. He doesn't want to be here, but he comes because he feels like he has to. And I told him, I'm like, release yourself. You don't have to do anything. That's the beauty of having siblings as well. Everyone has an option. But for me, the struggle became a non-issue once I had
Mhm.
children, because my life
Mhm.
changed. It became a non-issue when I had my own e-commerce site while I was working full time, because I knew what it took and the dedication of seeing your ideas come to life. And so those are the things that changed, I guess, that allowed the friction to kind of dissipate a little. Time, experience, and just life.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. I think that's also another like second thing is the e-commerce piece, being able to at least start a business, even if it's on your own outside of your family business,
Yeah.
that teaches you a lot about, oh wow, why aren't we doing this over
Mhm.
there?
Right.
So you can bring that knowledge, that expertise, that experience in addition to the corporate America, because corporate America has the resources.
Hmm.
These are much larger companies, so you're able to see quote unquote best practices
Yeah.
that you can now implement in the business. So let's talk about your perspective on manufacturing, because you mentioned that at the time that you decided to come into the business, you said the world was changing.
Hmm.
What was that, and how did that change your perspective on joining the family business outside of obviously your personal reasons?
Yeah. The world was changing in the sense that there was manufacturing, industrial manufacturing has always been kind of a door to door sales, very much a relationship building. You go to the vestibule to let you in, talk to their internal salespeople, and then, you get orders and you move forward. Um, that was changing in an e-commerce sense where you would build these websites and then you had to have metadata and you had to have alt text in your pictures and you had to write for search engine optimization. And these were all brand new things in manufacturing. Like my dad being an engineer, he's kind of like, well, let's see the case study on this and let's see the data. And it's like, no, you have to be on the front end of the wave. Like you have to kind of be inventive in that and show the marketplace what they're looking for so that
Mm,
they will then come. You don't want to be in the case study because that means you're too late. So
mm,
it was a
mm,
different thought process. And I think once we started getting attention through those marketing tactics, that online marketing, it started to make sense. Now, the traditional relationships in sales are still number one, word of mouth. But we're at a point now where I won't even go to a place that doesn't have a website or Instagram account. Like I need to know what I'm walking into. And
exactly.
it took maybe 25 years to kind of get there. But when I said to my dad, we have to redo this website, it's like War and Peace. He's like, well, we just did it 5 years ago, So the thought, can you imagine like a company keeping a website longer than 5 years?
Oh,
How
I've seen some websites, and I'm thinking this needs to be upgraded.
right. Everyone
Get a
knows that it
template.
needs to be upgraded, or like, this is a terrible template. The sophistication of the buyer had changed as well, and it
Mhm.
continues to change.
Yeah.
So those are the things that caused me to see that a fresh perspective was needed. Otherwise, we would probably dwindle off. We could have probably continued doing what we were doing, but it wasn't going to help us get to the next level because either you're going to grow or you're going to die.
Yep.
And that was the decision point, the inflection point for
Right.
us.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Obviously, even though you grew up in an engineering household,
Mhm.
um, talk about like now taking your corporate experience, your commercial experience, and taking over the family business in such even in such a technical
Yeah.
industry, right?
Right. I always tease people and they're like, well, you're not an engineer, so how are you running an electronics manufacturing company? And I was like, do you think the guy running KFC knows the 13, 12 herbs and spices that go into the chicken? I mean, honestly, there's a lot of like solid business practice that you need to run a business. It doesn't take an engineer to run a business.
Correct.
And I think that one of the things that we well, first thing I did was I said, I need to back to school and finish my MBA. And honestly, getting an MBA does not teach you how to run a business at all. That's a misnomer. But what it does teach you is how to think. It allows you to go through multiple case studies so that you're able to see different scenarios and how they work. You're able to look at financial concepts in a different way because when you're running a business, you really need a dashboard. You need your KPIs, you need to look at
Hmm.
cash flow, you need to be able to have intelligent conversations with your CPA, your bookkeeper, your CFO, and the marketing plan and the sales plan. All these things have to be in alignment.
Right.
And when I started working with my father, I said, I have no interest in being an engineer, but I grew up in the business So I knew how to read drawings and schematics. I knew how to price things. I knew how to
Yes.
build things. So I knew all aspects of the business. It wasn't like I was coming into a day spa and, being able to run it. I probably would not be able to do it. Not,
Mhm.
I've never worked in a spa, but this was something that I grew up in. Um, so I knew how to make money. I knew how we would have to change and adjust. I knew how we needed to bring in people in different areas. Like we didn't have a CFO. So one of the things I did, first things, was hire a fractional CFO. I wanted to be at a certain point. So I realized that I needed to get a board of advisors to come in and help with directional things that we needed as far as people, as far as types of contracts we needed, right, around profit margin and mix of products and services. Product market fit was another thing that we looked at, and just really analyze, where are we going? Are we just going to keep doing the same thing that we're doing because things change? Like aerospace used to just be satellites and missiles. Now aerospace is anything that doesn't touch the ground. So we're talking about drones.
Yeah.
We're even talking about flying cars. And if we don't look in aerospace, let's say, and make that pivot, or if we don't look in EV in some way, or the environment and climate change, then we're missing the pivot that our industry of manufacturing is headed. So those are the things that I work on, and I identify as the direction. So I'm the captain of the visionary, as they say in EOS,
Yes.
to make sure that we're headed in the right direction and that we have the fuel to take us there.
I really love this because I think this is where, especially with manufacturing being such a legacy sector
Mm-hmm.
or legacy industry within a legacy sector,
Yeah.
um, is how can medium-sized businesses grow and innovate, right?
Right.
Especially with technologies that are coming on right now. But before we transition into sort of like the industrial evolution, which you touched on
Mm-hmm.
just now, I'd like to know there must have been a lesson that you learned in those early leadership days that
Mm-hmm.
brought you to the point where you said, okay, I need a board of directors, I need a fractional CFO,
Mm-hmm.
we need to figure out our business model moving forward. Like, what was that lesson that prompted?
um, Revenue flat, like a flat revenue,
Mm,
um, because eventually you're not going to be flat. You're either going to, something's either going to take you up or down.
yeah.
I looked at our customer concentration,
Oh,
and that
mm,
it seemed
oh,
that there were
can
a
we talk?
couple of issues. I mean, I talked to and it's not a bad thing. There's a lot of companies that are doing very, very well with two customers.
Right.
But in Business 101, they teach you that your customer concentration needs to be less than 20% per company so that they don't take you down.
Yeah.
And there was a company that was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. No matter how much we grew, they grew with us, and which is a beautiful, wonderful thing. But as you know, it's hard to find employees,
Hmm.
especially in advanced manufacturing.
Yep.
So we needed to get a plan as to how we find employees and how we were going to train them, because tech schools, at least in this area, kids are using tech schools to help enhance their college resume as they go off to become engineers. So they're not even
Hmm.
teaching the workforce of tomorrow that's local. They're making them better engineering students, which is also a great thing.
Right.
Doesn't really fix the situation of what, to your point, like a legacy industry that could eventually suffer based on
Mm.
labor issues. Uh, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, I'm going to ask this question later, but maybe you can just maybe lightly touch on workforce, what you're seeing out there.
Hmm.
You mentioned engineering schools and upskilling.
Yeah. So what I've seen, and a lot of people give Gen Z a hard time, and as a mother of two Gen Zs, I think I have such intimate knowledge that I've been able to do a lot of trial and error at home. And I found that with them, they are, what makes them unique and different is that they are basically the children of Gen X.
Mhm.
And we were the kids that were the latchkey kids. We would come home at like off the bus from like fourth grade, and parents were like, lock the doors and don't let anyone in. And, if you get hungry, you can start dinner. Like we were very independent. I
Yes.
mean, God, thank God we're alive at this point. Cause I remember just like go on my bike and go anywhere I wanted. And my parents were like, have fun. I mean, there was no, like, barriers. And I think because of that, and I was like, thank God, I should have been dead like 15 times as a Gen X kid. But by the grace of God, I'm still here. And because of that, we may be a little bit more helicopterish with our kids,
Mhm.
as far as like trying to guide them and trying to help them make decisions. And I think it's been a little bit too much, to the point where a lot of them almost don't trust themselves. And you
Mm.
add the layer of COVID and them being in school at the time, like sequestered in their rooms. And they're also native digital users, have adopted technology since basically birth. They were the kids that they were two, and we were handing them, I would hand my kid my phone so they could watch a movie
Right.
and or play a game. And we didn't know any better, but that's just how technology evolved and how our generation evolved. And so when I take into account all the ways that we poorly raised our children in many ways, but the things that we did very, very well, you have just a really uniquely insightful group of people that are okay with working independently by themselves, but their attention spans don't exist because they're they're used to their reward center. Their reptilian brain
Mm.
is always like, what's
Mm.
this, what's that? They're getting, swipe left, swipe right. They need that interaction. And so we have to, if they're going to work in this type of environment like electronics manufacturing, being able to focus on a task, it takes a little while for them to train that muscle because it just really wasn't there. Even in school, teachers have had to adapt their teaching method to changing up what it is that they're teaching them. So, and then the way that they do that, the technology enhancements to education, and think about how now kids that are my kids are in high school. And I think one time my kid gave me something that I was like, write me. Sometimes part of punishment is like, I need you to write to me what you've learned. And one day, this beautiful piece of literature shows up on my phone, and I know good and well my kid didn't write this. And that's when I realized how technology had changed, because I have a friend who's a computer science professor, and he's like, oh, they AI'd you. That's a chat. And so they adopt technology very quickly. And so now it's like, how do you now integrate that generation in so that they can help you, because they are such great adopters. Sorry, that's our bell. If you hear that, they're such native, their native use of technology is actually phenomenal. I had employees who we've tried to train on how to use some of our pick and place robots, and we had a 15-year-old, who's my friend's son, who came in and learned how to program the thing in 3 days. And that's because he grew up going to camps, and in school they taught him how to program in Python and all types of other things. And so they come in with a special set of skills that we really need to examine and see how we can put them for better use within the company to help you grow, and then to maintain competitiveness as well.
Yeah. So it sounds as though it's more of a context switching from
Mhm.
focus oriented tasks to actual more like sort of adaptive
Yeah,
type of
engagement.
engagement to increase that
Mhm.
engagement
Yeah,
based on what how their brain processes information.
yeah, and it may not
Um,
be what we need in the moment, but maybe work needs to change. All the information that I read about the future of work is usually in white collar work. There's not a lot in the hourly blue collar work.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing that we have to become more thoughtful in the way that we approach it. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of turnover of Gen Z. But I find them to be really interesting. This is the first time we've had a lot of younger people. I say a lot, I say like more than one, working for us and actually engaged in the work and happy at
Yeah.
their work.
Yeah. I just interviewed last year Dan Alford
Mm-hmm.
of ARC Specialties. He's a roboticist.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually talks about a lot of the engagement tools that he incorporates in the company to
Yeah.
attract Gen Zers.
Wow.
So I'll probably, definitely, maybe you should take a listen to that episode.
I'd love
And
to.
I
We're
can
already like
definitely,
thinking about how we can connect.
yeah, and I can make an introduction
Okay.
to him because he's pretty wonderful.
Mm.
So wow, let's segue now into the industrial evolution.
Yeah.
What is the biggest misconception about modern day manufacturing?
That like my book, Dark, Dirty, and Dangerous. It's
Yes.
that these young people are going to be in this facility, like, and there's no lighting. They're going to be working with metal and a hammer, trying to forge steel, and it's loud and noisy, and there's just a really outdated perception, and that's our fault as
Mm,
manufacturers. When manufacturing evolved, we just never shared what that evolution looked like, that what a manufacturing workplace is like, what manufacturers do. Um, I'm in. I'm a co-chair for the Southeastern Pennsylvania Manufacturing Alliance, and in that alliance, we have bakers, we have glass makers, cabinet
mm,
makers, electronics manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturers, and it's just there's so many different forms because manufacturing is really taking something from its like nascent raw material, just taking raw material and then building it, making it into something else.
yeah.
And that's even taking two pieces of plastic and putting screws in it. Now you have created something and you have manufactured. I've seen people say they're a manufacturer and they put office furniture together. They are, in essence, in a true form, manufacturing product. And we really just don't share what that is or what it looks like.
Yeah. It's almost like the alchemist. You're taking nothing and
Yeah.
creating something. Um, how has that changed your facility in the last 5 years? Like how has your facility changed in the last 5 years, especially with COVID?
So, because we're essential, whenever you do any work for the government, you're essential. We didn't stop working. We were shut down for one day. What we did was, create barriers for people who may have been facing one another, spaced people out, and have changed the process of how we manufacture. So instead of one person working on something from start to finish, we took a batch approach
Mm,
to some of the more complicated work because we didn't have people who could do that highly technical, experienced work. So we broke down the processes to smaller tasks so that folks that couldn't do high complexity wiring could like build up their skill set, and also we were getting work done in the process. So those things have helped us with processing and training at the same time because training had to be looked at in a different way.
right.
So training people on the work, but also making sure that it was still high quality product.
Okay. Um, that's interesting. Number one, why is your business essential? Can you explain that to the listeners?
So I guess essential is anything that at the time of COVID,
Hmm.
essential workers were obviously hospitals, fire departments, and a whole list of others. But if you had any product that you were building for the Department of Defense and other agencies, they didn't want you to stop because it was still important to get it done to meet the deadlines. And so they deemed those particular companies or industries as essential. And you were given permission to continue working, whereas other companies were not allowed to open their doors. They wanted to minimize the risk. So some companies were deemed as essential and they were allow you to continue operating. Now, had we not been able to do that, I don't know if we would be here today.
Yeah.
A lot of companies were shut down. And as far as Black businesses, I believe it's 42% of Black businesses failed during that time. So there were a lot of things that contributed to, I mean, by the grace of God, we're still here because of that essential worker status or essential business status.
Interesting. And thank you for clarifying that. You also mentioned highly technical experienced work.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was a Gen Z, maybe soon, you know, Gen Z Alpha coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and I was going to school, college, or maybe even a technical college,
Mm-hmm.
um, w- what kind of work or what kind of degree can I look to earn in order to be able to come in and really add value and have that highly technical skill set?
So with the work that we do, the interesting thing is that you can't really, I mean, you could go to school and become a technician in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
but most of the people that work here learned the work
On the job.
by working here.
Yeah.
They were trained here,
Okay.
and they had an interest in building things, in taking something apart, seeing how it works, taking a job from pieces into having a finished product. They had great pride in knowing that they were contributing to the submarine industrial base, or creating automated guided vehicles, and all of the different industries that we touch. And for us, we really hire around our culture. So our core values are presence, team, and pride. Because I would rather take someone who has those core values and teach them how to be good in manufacturing than taking somebody who's really great in manufacturing and destroys the entire culture that we've built. And we've had that. And when I came in and took over, one of the things was really focusing on what are our core values? What's the culture that we are trying to build here? Because if you don't have these things in place, the person who's the loudest out there really dictates the culture of the company.
Right.
And so we needed to really fix what that was. It can be dysfunctional at times. Even though you have wonderful people working, everyone's a little bit directionless and not understanding how do we move, how do we treat each other, if there's a disagreement, how do we then handle it? And we needed to lay that foundation. And that allowed us to create a place that when people walked in, they knew what type of environment to expect. And I think
Right.
people they have expectations of where and how they want to spend their time. No one wants to be in a dysfunctional company. And that's not a place that I would want to run anyway. So for young people, the skill set is just like I said, come in with, if that's a culture that you would want to work in, you like working independently, we teach you how to read blueprints and schematics. One of the first things we teach folks in the first 90 days is how to solder and put together panels.
Okay.
Yeah, they wire panels and learn how to solder. And within the first 90 days, the goal is always to have them have the ability to at least build a simple cable assembly and do a bit of a rotation to see where they feel that which area of business, whether it's printed circuit board assembly, cable, wiring harnesses, box build enclosures, panels, wherever they want to really work in or they enjoy, we try to put people in those areas. So I know with my kids coming in, they work on panels all the time. And I had to explain to them, and my 16-year-old would even say, I understand why you have us do this type of work, because we're always so drawn to our phones and our attention is elsewhere. This allows us to build that muscle of being able to focus in on a job and see it to completion, because you know what the expectation is. So it's a really great first assembly for young people to work on. And it's kind of like, once you're there, you realize whether you're going to like the work or not, because it really encompasses a lot of things that we do here.
Do you guys, something just came up to mind, but I
Yeah.
was like, I would love to have a kit where I can be at home and create something and come up with my own panels. But obviously, I
Yeah.
would have to have
Yeah.
a soldering machine.
You know, they're not expensive. They sell them online, so you could definitely get a soldering iron and some solder and knock yourself out.
Yeah, yeah, I love creating with my hands, so it's fun. It
Well,
kind
we're
of
hiring, so if you want to come in, you don't have to do it at home. You could do it here.
no, I have other purpose.
I'm
um,
sure. I'm sure. Just throwing it out there, you know.
but when I come from the tour for the tour, I'm definitely going to sit down and try and put together a panel in a day.
Well, okay. Let's do that. Let's do that.
um, so thank you for walking us through that, because I think that's really important for people to understand the modern manufacturing realities around, the future of work, the workforce, but then also really how do we encourage the younger generation to just contribute and actually be actively involved in this sector and other interrelated sectors that actually can impact the economy.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts on, I want to go into market forces now. So what are your thoughts on the proposed China tariffs, and how is that affecting your strategic plan?
I think, like with anything, there's always unintended consequences whenever you make a decision on any side of it. So to stay non-political, I will say
Yes.
that we still are suffering from tariffs from the 8 years ago when they were
Mm-hmm.
first instituted, and so they're still in the pricing of raw material. And in electronics, most things come from Asia, so it's not just China that's going to see that. There's other companies and subsidiaries that it touches materials wise. Um, and I think that, so in our work, we don't design the products that we build. We sell time. So a company will come to us and say, hey, we have this assembly. We need you to build the electronics. And once we've built them, we ship them to the customer as part of their supply chain. So we're their outsourced manufacturing provider. And we send those products for final assembly. And we do that for about 30 different companies, but there's a core group that we are their main manufacturer. And when we do that, they know what the prices should be because they've created and assembled the product, or at least have designed the product.
Right.
And may have done a prototype. Most of our customers now have us do the first build, and we work out the issues with them. So with that, when there are changes in prices, we have to stay in constant communication. Obviously, they know that the products that they've created are going to have some issues, which will impact margins across the board. Just like our strategy last time was try to minimize the impact of how much it's going to hit the margin, and everyone knows to really be open in conversation about price changes and fluctuations. But we also always have worked in electronics as commodities. There's gold and tin and aluminum and all types of things in electronic components. So those prices change as well, but this is a little bit more, those are incremental price changes. This is kind of huge and it can just, you really can't, there's no price list for tariffs. So we don't know until they hit.
So considering this margin compression, How is the company preparing itself and its clients for these supply chain challenges?
So part of the process is that purchasing is aware of how much something should cost. And so whenever something comes in, we've pre-negotiated a lot of these pricing, a lot of the pricing. So if there is a change, we then are able to have a conversation on the front end. It doesn't change while we're in process of a purchase order. What it happens is it might be the next time we go to buy,
Right.
the supplier had to bring in product that now carries a tariff, and they will then impose that tariff on us and our pricing, and then we in turn have to turn it around and charge our customer for that, and then they in turn have to charge their client unless they've already priced it as a
Mm.
part of the
And
bid.
they have to take the loss.
Right. Or we try to figure out how to sustain the loss across various aspects of that supply chain. And it just doesn't, it's not predictable.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Have you guys thought about? I mean, and this is a thing is that for, small medium-sized businesses, I'm curious if maybe there's a way that you guys can put together some sort of a hedging product in place.
Yeah, we have the ability to take on consigned product. There's a lot of things that we've talked to our suppliers about in the past. So I know what exists for us. As far as hedging, it's hard because
Yeah.
the way that our companies that we do business work, the way that they work is that they have a sales team and they may have targets to sell particular systems or products, but it's unpredictable as to what they're going to sell until they
Yeah.
get to that client and see what their need is. So
Mhm.
once the need is determined, then the order is placed for whatever industrial equipment is needed to help their client. So they don't know what the demand is going to be. So they can't tell us, we can't build ahead. So one of the things that we've talked about is standardization of product so
Mhm.
that there's at least, a couple of assemblies that are always going to be consistent.
Right.
How do we then make sure that if you guys have targets that we can at least have some safety stock built up so that if there is an issue, with a product or trying to bring material in and the prices have shot up, that it's not jarring to the bottom line because we have brought material in earlier and are using those prices to determine the price of that system. So the problem with that, bringing in safety stock or consignment, is that it eats up cash flow.
Right.
And if you put if you think of running a company, I always tell people, like I've told my staff, it's like having three rivers next to one another and they
Mhm.
all are flowing at a different rate and maybe sometimes even in different directions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you were to take a snapshot of those three rivers and then 5 minutes later take a snapshot, it's totally different. Um, whatever's making that picture, because you have money coming in, you have money going out, you have material coming in and coming out. So maybe that's four rivers.
Yes.
And based on that, your company is telling a different story. So if I take one of those rivers and I make the flow slower or more narrow because now I have less cash flow because it's an inventory, it's
Mhm.
sitting there and it cripples the company from being able to do things such as maybe hire more employees because I've deployed cash into inventory. So everything, again, unintended consequences, right? You want to do right by your client, but you're tying up cash and the cash could be deployed in other ways to help your company either grow or become more efficient.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. And thanks for walking us through that.
Mhm.
What is your take on Moore's Law in relation to manufacturing and IT infrastructure?
Um, Geez, I feel like Moore's law is being blown out of the water, especially with how fast AI has taken off. And I
Yes.
forget what the new company that just came out, Deep
Deep,
something.
actually, that was going to be a question that I have for you because I so let Okay, let me ask you other questions.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm getting ahead of you.
No, I'm gonna combine three questions, and you can take your time to
Okay.
answer.
Okay,
So
go
the
ahead.
first the first question obviously is about Moore's law in relation to manufacturing and
Okay.
IT infrastructure. The second question is, on your socials, you seem like a heavy user of AI.
Uh-huh.
And so I'd like to know, how is AI changing your day to day on a personal and business perspective? And the third question is specifically about DeepSeek. Um, Given your experience with AI and also just your intuition, what surprised you the most about DeepSeek, and also the concept, theory of constraints?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Jeez, this is like being back in grad school. Okay. So Moore's law. So we do use technology within the company, and we're not super high tech because of the work that we do that's custom.
Yeah.
I think that I would have a bigger spend in technology if the volume of our robotics, like the pick and place robots that are needed, I would need to change technology probably more frequently because of the rate in
Mhm.
which speed would be necessary.
Yeah.
Even with our computers, we're not doing high tech computing, so I usually try to shift and change out our technology every 3 years, um, because no one wants to wait 5 minutes for their computer to
Yeah.
open up. But all the systems that we use, unless it's like running from a cloud, if it has to be stored locally, which is not really a problem anymore, it obviously slows down the system, and we're trying to be more efficient. So as far as IT is concerned, we're trying to shift everything to cloud so we can continue to be fast. As far as our equipment, sometimes I think it's something that I'm looking at is it's easier to buy a company that already has technology that's better than yours than it would be for us to implement and integrate some type of a new technology shift, because by the time we've learned how to use it, it's probably already obsolete.
Correct.
So, so that's my take on Moore's law, AI, and how have I been integrating, implementing. I would say that we're still kind of at those very initial stages, because of our agreements, our drawings, schematics cannot be put through AI, obviously, because we still don't know the impact on who owns the data, even though they say you don't, unless you're using a free tool. And the work that, I mean, I think it would be really, really cool to use it. And this is what I'm looking at. The use case right now is to take the data from our assemblies and the time, because we sell time. We tell somebody
Mhm.
it'll take us X minutes to build, and this is how much we charge to build your assemblies. It would be interesting to be able to take all of that data and have use some type of machine learning uh,
Mhm.
to identify where our issues are. So is it every time we work with this particular customer, we're off in our quotations? And it's, why is it this particular, can we get it down to material use? Is it because of this particular type of cable that's very difficult to work with? Or if it's printed circuit board, is it because the parts are so small that the pick and place is dropping them, or we need to get a machine that is able to identify parts that are smaller? So we're not, because there's so many moving parts, we're not able to really look at all of the data that we have, and make really strategic. Like, we can make decisions and find issues and problem solve, but
Right.
the level of problem solving is like, when you take all of the data in your company, and I take that and I juxtapose it with the purchasing data and our financial data of when we're getting paid, and you're able to make really cool observations. Maybe there's a company that you probably just shouldn't do work with because they don't pay you on time, the drawings are never correct, and every time you work with a particular material, it just causes you to lose money. Those are the things that AI will allow us to do,
Yeah.
and that's something that we're working on right now. We're working on data integrity. So that's like the first. So I have this
The first step.
desire to do tons of things with AI. But if your data is trash, what you're going to get is trash.
Yeah.
We're training everyone on how to make sure everything is clean and how to be consistent and what's the process behind it, so we know what we're feeding into it will give us something that's worthwhile. Otherwise, we just would waste a lot of time and money on that. Um, and then as far as DeepSeek is concerned and the theory of constraints, I believe that, I mean, I look at it right now, what we're going through. Um, a lot of diverse companies that are suffering from not being able to get grant funding or taking DEI out. And, I think people think it solves a lot of issues, but what happens in those moments is that amazing things come out of it. I honestly believe it. So like with DeepThink, when they said, okay, we're only going to allow a certain number of chips be sold outside of the country because we need all the chips here so that we can make sure that ChatGPT and Claude and all the other Gemini work. And, because it costs a lot of money and we need a lot of chips. And then what they were able to do in creating a better model with less chips and less money really was because they had no choice. And
Right.
so I think when you have no choice and you have to make do, amazing things come out of it. And it's almost like, a rose growing out of concrete. Like it should not
Mm.
even be there, but it found a way to grow, thrive, and live and become something amazing. And so while it's the struggle when you're living in it is terrible, just like with DeepThink, like, geez, what are we going to do with 5 chips? They figured out a way to make now what it's done is caused everyone who makes you look at all the wastefulness that,
Yes, lots of wastefulness. But
that we've experienced in being so gluttonous and trying to protect what our technology, because it's a race, right? But they just got lapped in the
yeah,
race. And um now, I mean, we saw what the market did in
yeah.
response to hearing it. Like, I think
Mm.
it's kind of cool. It's a reminder for me
Mm.
that when things look dismal and that you really have no hope, that you have to really hunker down and figure out, based on what we've got, what can we do?
Yeah, yeah, that I mean, I was talking to a friend who actually works in the healthcare space for a large multinational conglomerate. And she was saying that, they have a Chinese division.
Uh-huh.
But what was interesting is because the Chinese division doesn't have access to the resources that the American division has, even though it's the same company.
Yeah.
So so for example, if the company here in America decides to use Meta's VR
Hmm.
thing for robotic surgery, it's very expensive. But
Right.
because the China division doesn't have access to Meta's VR
Hmm.
for as part of, so they actually designed their own,
Yeah.
because again, those constraints, they don't have access to the mothership.
Right.
And so they designed their own VR, which is even 10x better
Right.
for robotic surgery, right? So these are the things that sometimes when you look at the people who are spearheading these things, they're living in luxury. They're looking at pricing components from a
Yeah.
from a pricing perspective that is not rooted in reality,
Right.
that is not really about how can we actually do better? How can we create? We are an innovation economy. How can we actually create better chips that are actually AI native chips versus using maybe GPUs or CPUs that don't really have the power
Hmm.
to drive AI forward? Instead, we're just getting billions of dollars, which is great that we have those resources. But
Right.
I think we forget that innovation really comes out of constraints.
Yeah.
And so when
Absolutely.
you see something like a DeepSeek come out, you're just like, okay, hold on a moment.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute. What is missing here? And
Yeah.
really try to to understand. And the fact that, like you said, when OpenAI came out, the original concept was for it to be open source,
Mm-hmm.
but then it became closed. So then there's no innovation around that.
Right.
And so now, it's fascinating to watch. Like you said, when sometimes things are taken away, or opportunities you think that you were relying on are gone, then it's
Mm-hmm.
really up to you at that point to really start to think, okay, how can this is actually a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. I mean, as you were talking, for some reason, I had in my mind that open source is almost like DEI, like
Mm,
personified, because you've opened it and you've created in a way that everyone is invited to the table. Everyone can take and give freely. And, all it is based on education level. So you can learn how to program, or you can learn more so that you can at least get to the table and participate. And I think that if DEI wasn't so vilified and it was looked at in a sense that you're giving everyone an opportunity to participate. Can you imagine if we said, yeah, China, go ahead and take all the chips you need? They would have, I don't know if they would have come up with that, but there was some company that would have, because they wouldn't have the access to come
right.
up with it. So I guess it's like two sides of the coin. Like in one instance, having it open and fair, it allows for everyone to innovate. But when you are constrained and are only given a short leash or a short window of opportunity to create, you're also able to innovate
Yes.
oftentimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just loving watching this, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Thanks for at least answering those, what, four questions.
I hope I hit is that everything? I wrote them down because I don't know if people think that you gave me the questions in advance, but not at all. So this is
No,
all.
actually, so I think this is something, because a lot of times, sometimes I've been a guest on podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some podcasters will actually give questions ahead of time. I try not to do that. I might
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, we might talk about this, but we didn't even share any information
Yeah.
whatsoever. So this is very organic, which I like.
I'm glad I knew the answers.
Well, I figured you're pretty smart.
Well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I want to go back to family-owned businesses
Mhm.
um, in manufacturing. What do you think the future is specific to family-owned businesses?
Family-owned businesses, I don't think they're going anywhere. I think there's a lot of, and I've asked people about the specific data because they say, um, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, that usually after a couple generations, the businesses fail. But I don't know that they actually fail more so than sell,
Mm,
because a lot of people, think of all the people who starting the startups. They're starting the company so they can sell them. They're not starting them to like create generational wealth. Um,
well, okay, so there's a little bit of a misconception around that, but yes, that is true. That is the perception. Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think the idea is to create something, and if you have a marketplace for it and someone wants to buy it, now you can have that money to do something else with, whether it's start another company, buy another company. So I'm not really sure of the data exactly. But I think that as far as family businesses are, and I talk about this a lot with my friends, um, that I think there's a cultural disconnect at times.
Hmm.
So
Tell me more.
if I look at a lot of my white counterparts that have family businesses, people aren't saying like, "Oh, your family gave you a business." They're like, "Oh, that's great. You have this family business." I find that a lot of my black friends they're like, "Oh, well, don't you feel like do you feel like you should have made it by yourself?" And I said,
Hmm.
not, I didn't even think about not making it. I mean, I was making it in my corporate career. I made a decision to take the baton and go next level. And I don't know that, to me, that's an opportunity. And
Yeah.
I felt that I would not be making a smart decision to not do that, especially because it's so rare for
Hmm.
people of color and women to be in this position. and to open doors for others and explain to others, like, you can have a great life working in manufacturing, having a family owned business.
Right.
I found that through my network. I found the Family Business magazine. I didn't even know it existed until I was named to their transformational women and family business list. And I met all these amazing people who had family businesses. So there's like communities
Mm-hmm.
where they're sharing. I mean, there's like cousins and aunts and uncles, like 5 generations. We've been around for 100 years. We're celebrating 150 years next week. Things that I didn't have. That wasn't part of my community. That wasn't part of
Right.
my father's community. And as I move through the world and I find other people of color, I now have my own community of people of color who have family businesses. And each one of us were like, we don't know any other person of color that has a generational family business. So I would like to see more conversations around it, because there's not, my friend Nicole would say she can't leave her job to her kids. And I was like, you're so right. Name another thing where you can take all of your sacrifice, second mortgage on your home that you had to do, sleepless nights, all of your relationships, all of the time and energy, and you put it into this entity. And now you're able to hand it off. You can't do that with a job. You can't say, now you're director of manufacturing or, of accounting with your job. And so it's this magical thing that we, again, just like manufacturing, don't talk about, even though most of the companies in the world are family business.
Yeah.
And maybe it's, one of the best kept secrets that people don't realize. But I found with my interaction with those folks at Family Business Magazine, that community is that they're sharing education, they're sharing connections. They're talking about how they transitioned. They're talking about pain points. They have family offices. They have their chief of staff. They have a whole staff of their family office that'll come to the conferences. They hold family meetings at their family ranches and talk about the direction that or how they want to be good stewards of their family foundation. And it was so eye-opening for me. And I now see things so differently that I started creating those things for my children, as far as how important it is for them to work for me. This was the first year where I said, you need to work for people who don't love you, so you can see what it's like and work somewhere else, and where you have to show up on time and people may not like you being on your phone, and then you can come back. And it was those lessons that showed my kids what they really had. And so they met with their financial planner actually last week to go over investments that we have for them, because in family business you can pay your kids and that money can be invested in an IRA for them. And before they're even leaving high school, they have retirement accounts.
Right.
And those are things that I try to talk to other folks about, why family business is important as far as generational wealth. And I'm not talking about tens of millions of dollars generational wealth, to the point where, and I'm not trying to retire my kids with this money, by the way. This is more of a lesson in compounding for them, so that they learn how to save for themselves. Just
And
really,
for them to also see how money works.
yes, exactly. Like, when they were into a particular video game system, we bought the stock associated to the company, and they saw how that stock tripled, quadrupled, split over the years, because, that's another element of how do you deploy the money, the resources that you have. How do we figure out who we're going to make donations to? Just really normalizing these conversations. And I try to help other friends in that thought process. And it's like, you make a lot of money, friend. So you have a job and you are getting a paycheck, but you also have to pay a lot of taxes on that. What if you were, you owned a business, or you owned things where you're creating wealth in a different way, because the tax structure is completely different for a business. And how do you now grow that for purposes of generational wealth? Um, and we just started having these conversations a lot, actually pretty frequently. And the goal is to change the perception of how money should be created, how it should grow, how it should be treated in a family sense. I have different conversations with my kids about money than I'm sure a lot of people have about, I mean, I tell them the real price. I was like, your school costs this much. This is how
Yeah.
much we bring in. This is how much our taxes were. This is how much the company made. Like, I want to normalize money for them. I try to do the same thing with my friends, normalizing, like, if you paid your kids, they're at this tax rate, then they can pay for their private school.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that when I talk about family business, where I think it's going to go away, I think we still have to have more education, particularly in the Black community about it, diverse communities about it, more so Black, because I think we're the ones that don't have that education more so. When you look at the statistics now, like Hispanic businesses, family-owned businesses are almost like leapfrogging Black-owned businesses. Asian-owned businesses have always been doing better than Black and Hispanic businesses. So within the Black community, we have a lot of education, but I think as we start pushing that, we can start changing the trajectory and closing the wealth gap, because now we've created generational wealth.
Yeah.
But as far as family business, I don't think that's going anywhere for all the other demographics, but we really need to work on that, the marketing and education of transitioning family businesses within the Black community.
And also just I think I like your approach, and I've seen this be successful with other family owned businesses, because so the data actually shows, I think it's after the second or third generation
Mm-hmm.
where the family members are no longer affiliated with the company that they built from
Right.
the beginning. Okay. So there's that statistic, but I think the reason why that happens is because there really isn't a transition planning, not only just from a wealth
Mm-hmm.
management
That's
perspective,
succession. Yeah.
but I think it's also, a lot of people start family businesses and they don't professionalize the business.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a pool of nepotism
Mm-hmm.
and a way for the family to have its lifestyle without really making it operationally effective. And so that's maybe where you see that statistic and that fall off and that cliff happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, to your point, it's really the education piece around, pretty much, it has to be holistic. It can't just be like siloed,
Right.
it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to have, I think in March, I'm having uh, Alex Bean. He's coming on to talk about his experiences, not as a family owned business, but as a venture founder who actually had a unicorn exit
Mm-hmm.
and now has come into this wealth,
Right.
which is a rich person's problem to have, because now you have to deal with children.
Right.
How do your children see you? What is that legacy that you want to create? So we're going to talk about more about that legacy and what he's actually building, the infrastructure that he created around family offices. So I think that would be a good thing to ask him. I'm going to bring up some of your pointers.
Yeah. Please do. I'd love to hear what he says. I can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go into a rapid fire segment.
Oh, wait, can I just say one thing real quick?
Yes.
So when I think about succession planning, it wasn't until, like, I've heard all those statistics, and it wasn't until I was in this position as Gen 2, looking at Gen 3, thinking about succession planning, and even thinking about what I want to do with my own life for the next round. I'm like, if there becomes a point where I will feel like I'm not the best president for ElectroSoft, especially to go where we need to go, in my opinion. And that may mean bringing on private equity partners or hiring a CEO and changing the company over to a C Corp where we have shares and I have a fiduciary board that runs the company. And I started looking at so many different options where you may not be 100% family owned, but you don't have to operate the company or run the company in order for it to be a family owned business. So there's so many ways to look at succession planning. My kids may never want to work for the family business, but in my mind, as we go through this process is like, well, you will know how it works. You will know what it is. You'll know all the parties involved, and you will have advisors who will help you making decisions as the business grows and whatever you decide to do with it when you ultimately are an owner of the company. So I think that too for me was a learning curve because I look at my kids sometimes and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're never going to run this company. They want nothing to do with it. And they don't even like to work here sometimes. So, but that was me as well. And my parents, it took me being in my 30s to make the decision. So I want to give them that same runway. And in doing so, create a succession plan that makes sense in the case that I don't want to do this anymore. And it gives them the freedom to make decisions later on as well. So yeah, while companies do sometimes fail because of the lifestyle business, I also have learned that the families that sit and do what I did for ElectroSoft, create culture, values, how we're going to run, what is it that we believe in? What is the goal for this company? Do we want to be a 100-year company? So that everyone is in alignment with the direction, and that if we're going to be a 100-year company, this is what it takes. You bring in the people that are going to help you get there, and to be very disciplined behind the direction that you're headed. And so if it's a lifestyle company where you're using it as your personal piggy bank, then let it be that lifestyle brand. But if you really have come together as a family, which is what I do with my kids, and said, what are we doing here? What's the goal? And we talk about it. And we're in agreement, and, bring my dad on board, who's no longer an owner. But I feel that as the founder can help us create and craft the direction so that if we do want to be that 100-year company, that we're at least on the right track.
Yeah. And there are a lot of 100-year-old family-owned companies. I mean, just listening to you, it's like, how do you plan for that? Right? How do you begin with the end in mind? Okay, you're here, and so how do we get there? Who are the partners that we need to bring? What is the capital that we're going to need to get there? That still protects our interests, but at the same time allows these investors to help us get to the next phase. There's so many companies, even publicly traded companies, that are family-owned businesses. That also it does exist. L'Oreal is one that comes to mind. Geldwen is one that comes to mind. They manufacture building products, doors and windows. There's so many of them. So there is definitely precedence, and that's something that we can definitely talk about offline. But yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So here's a rapid fire segment. We're going to talk about sacred cows in the factory. We're going to challenge conventional wisdom. So just quick responses, but if you feel that you need to expand on something, or maybe you have a controversial viewpoint, you are in a safe space. So first question, made in America or made efficiently, which matters more?
Well, as of today, made in America.
Tell me more. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
It is January 28th, 2025. Everything is being focused on America. They just renamed it the Gulf of America. So if we're going to survive, made in America has become very important today.
Why? I want to dig into this a little bit more.
So I think that, there's a couple of ways that I look at this. Like, that was kind of jokingly, but honestly, as a supply chain professional trained in logistics, we have seen what happens when you lean too heavily on a global supply chain and how it constrains you. And I mean, this is from, I guess, back in the 50s, 60s, when Nike was making shoes overseas and taking advantage of basically arbitrage and allowing bigger profits. And so we realized that if this country charges 50 cents an hour and you can have 12-year-olds work on your projects, that you make way more money than somebody who's getting benefits and who is in a union and it's stateside. So we rather have the 12-year-old work for 50 cents an hour. And that's what everyone did. They followed suit. And then they're like, well, there's issues behind that. You shouldn't know child labor, slave labor, working conditions, like all of these things change, but it's still less expensive to make things overseas. So it's hard to compete as a nation when that's what you're up against. But we've created it ourselves. We've made that. We're sleeping in the bed that we've made. Also, when I believe it was the Suez Canal, when they had, there's no passage. So then if they float everything, most things from Asia overseas, and the fast boat is 6 weeks and the normal speed is 8 weeks, you can't fly everything over because now you're consuming all of the profit. So now your transportation infrastructure is suffering from closures. So when you have and I don't know if it has to be 100% American made, but I believe that you need to create an infrastructure or a supply chain that allows you to have multiple sources that are in different places so that you can guard against one like international incident shutting you down and causing you to leak money. So made in America, I think there's a hybrid between being efficient and being made in America. But if I had to choose, having your supply chain closer is very much more desired, but it's also more expensive.
Yeah. And I think that will be interesting, especially given costs savings or cost structures. And so maybe that might end up being passed on to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those are the sacrifices, give and take, that we have to.
Yeah. And as Americans, we want our $100 75-inch screen TVs at Walmart on, Black Friday. Like, we could say this was made in China, and we're like, or do you want this $2,000 made in America 75-inch TV? I don't really think they're going to choose the $2,000 TV. That's just what the consumers are used to.
But I think it's also lack of education around.
Well, I think it's that as long as you can afford it too, right?
Yeah.
People buy things that they
they
can afford in hopes to make them feel better about what's going on in the world or about themselves. It says a lot. We buy luxury goods. People buy purses that cost more than the amount of money they have to put in it. So there's a whole psychology behind it that we can educate people, but there's more.
Yeah, the psychometric part of things is definitely plays a huge factor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, family businesses, innovation incubators or innovation inhibitors?
They can definitely be innovation inhibitors. If you believe that you are so right, that you've created an echo chamber, you're training the next generation in exactly the way that you've done it, and you don't leave space for innovation, you can definitely cause the downfall of your company through inhibiting innovation.
What advice would you give to family business owners considering succession?
I think that you need some outside voices, not fiduciary board members, but fiduciary board members to run your company, but even a board of advisors to come in and really help you have a fresh perspective, fresh ideas. Education is really important. Make sure you're educating that next generation. And spending that time and money really making sure that the company, you're getting the best ideas as opposed to just, I guess, soothing one's ego.
Yeah, and when you say the next generation, you're not just referring only to the family members, you're also referring to the management team that can come up through the ranks as well.
Yeah, so I think that it depends on the size of the company and the and the who is in what place. Is this a hired CEO, or is this a family member that's driving the company? Is it, I've seen family businesses where they have an outside CEO
Right.
and family members work in the company, but they're not all board level. They're just owners. I
Mm-hmm.
know people who are chairman of the board for their family business, but they only have like 1% share in the company. So I think it depends on the structure. Definitely depends on and then who's seated and where.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Is reshoring realistic or just good PR?
Um, hmm. I think at this point it's good PR. We're not, to the earlier point of sending everything overseas. We no longer have a community, a culture around manufacturing. Parents, and like I said earlier, with generations being made, we have to look at the fact that generations, so our parents' generation who were part of manufacturing, or our grandparents actually that were part of manufacturing, saw all those jobs disappear with their children and said manufacturing is no longer a good job. And so because of that, we don't have people skilled enough to do the work that we've already sent away.
Hmm.
To turn that back on and just rejudge all the factories that are abandoned and now be this bastion of manufacturing is just not going to happen overnight.
Yep.
It takes a long time to turn that ship around. So right now, it would be wonderful, and I hope we can do it. I think it's important.
Yeah. Do you think that the CHIPS Act and the Infrastructure Act, and do you feel like that has helped bring awareness?
Um, Not really. I think there's a little bit of a missed opportunity. I think that one organization that's doing a good job is the Army's Build Submarines current. Um, I guess it's a campaign that they're doing it to bring about awareness to get more people into the submarine industrial base, because there are not enough people available to make what is needed, and these are definitely build made in America um, vehicles, ships that can't be outsourced, and so that's a problem. Um, yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Will AI make human expertise obsolete in manufacturing?
No, I think there's only no, I don't think so, because like prompt engineering, I think is going to be huge. You're going to need people, you're going to have to retool people. They may not be doing the same repetitive tasks, but you're going to have to reskill people to be able to program and ask AI to do specific things or to get specific information. Um, and that's all, you're always going to need someone to drive, and then the needs change. AI is not, I mean, it becomes smarter, but I don't know, I don't think we've lived that yet, where it's like evolved to the point where it's helped us innovate and really change the direction of a company. I think that's probably on the horizon, but I'll say as of now, we're still going to need people.
Yeah, for sure. Um, are we romanticizing manufacturing jobs?
No, there's no romance at all. I wish we could romanticize with the whole manufacturing. I think it'd be easier to hire people if they were in love with it. I think I always say manufacturing needs a sexy makeover. It's just, it
Yes.
sounds awful. It does not sound fun. It does not sound like something I want to do on a daily basis, but have been doing it on a daily basis. I think that's why people are always so stunned when I say that I'm in manufacturing, because they're like, "You don't look like you would be in manufacturing," and the stereotype is so strong that we need a new marketing campaign for
Yeah,
sure.
we need an Ogilvy to take on the manufacturing
Yes,
industry
yes,
and
yes,
do gut rebranding.
Yes.
Um, we talked about Moore's law earlier, but Moore's law in manufacturing, do you think it's dead or evolving?
Evolving.
Okay.
It's evolving because, you know, chips are getting faster and faster. Everything is getting faster. It's like, um, I think there's probably a time where they couldn't think that processing speeds would be as fast as they are. But we need to evolve as well. When you think about the environmental impact of fast processing speeds, the amount of heat that is generated, the amount of water that is necessary to cool. It's just like this, yes, this like crazy circle. Like, I mean, it's, and then to say that global warming doesn't exist, it's like, look, we have to be honest in a lot of this. Like, if we're going to get better, like, there's some honest truths that we need to accept.
Yeah.
And we played a part in disintegrating a lot of resources. So we need to be smarter in the way that we continue to evolve and move forward as a global economy. And what, you know, yeah, we get faster and faster, but if there's no water, what's the point, right? So there's some trade-offs.
If we can't even put out the fires here in LA, then, you know, I
Right.
don't know.
I was going to say that.
I don't know how we're gonna hydrate data centers, but you know,
Right. They're building data centers under oceans. So that they're like, oh, well, we don't need water. We'll just build it under the water.
and let's not worry about the mammalian aqua
Right.
the in the water, but you know,
Right. The whole entire oceanic environment that exists.
yeah,
Let's forget about that.
yeah, we're so smart.
Rivers
Okay,
underwater. Mhm.
can we still compete with China in advanced manufacturing?
Sure. I think that competition is always good and healthy. And I think that there's so many elements that play into it. I think that a lot of people come to the United States for education, and then they hire them back into their own country to help push their country forward. Same thing with the Olympics, right? All the like really good athletes are like, oh, I'm going back home to Kenya to run for that track team. We're like, are you kidding? You're here. So, yeah, I think that we need to look at it as just a better way to maintain talent, educate people, make it worth their while. It's going to just, it's highly competitive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Should some manufacturing sectors or industries be allowed to die?
Yes.
Ooh,
Yes. I mean, I think,
tell me more.
and I think I'm thinking across industries. I don't think there, to your point, are any sacred cows. I think some banks should have been allowed to fail. I think that there's so much greed there. The people that didn't take responsibility but still had golden parachutes doesn't really teach anybody anything. I think if a company doesn't innovate and they don't motivate their employees, they probably shouldn't be a company. So I think, and there's times obviously that you do all the right things and you try to pay your bills and the cash is not there because companies owe you money or they don't pay you, which a lot of companies are holding on to money and causing ARs to balloon right now and lines of credit to go up. So it's more expensive to really be in business. So yeah, I think that unfortunately it's like that book, The Great Game of Business, Jack. It really is a game that you're playing. And unfortunately, some people fail, but that's why they have bankruptcy and other protections that are in place to not completely wipe you out, hopefully, if your business is structured correctly. But yeah, I believe that you should be able to fail.
Yeah. Can I what sectors or what manufacturing industries do you think?
What sector should fail?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Or industry. Okay, let's bring it down to industry, not the whole sector.
Right. I think that, oh gosh, see, there's so many sectors. Okay, I won't say fail.
Okay.
Let me say this about automotive has had so many renaissance and down periods. It's almost like it's actually very sad. Sometimes it feels like feast or famine. They tried to push EVs on everyone, and people were like, "Yeah, I don't know if I want to." Like, I like going to the gas station and getting gas in 5 minutes. I want to sit there for 20 minutes and wait for my car to charge.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know that it needs to fail, and I don't know that they need to consolidate, but I feel like there needs to be more cross industrial collaboration in order for it to be more innovative,
Mm.
in order for it to, if they're going to create something that's going to allow like more efficiency, because we're thinking about getting away from fossil fuels and combustible engines for EVs, like it should work more collectively together. We can't move around without vehicles. Like, it's no longer a luxury. It's definitely a need for people. We can't hire people because we can't get people out to our facility. A lot of people are kind of not placed in the geographical regions where there is employment, and vehicles is the way to solve it. And so I feel like if there is no collaborative approach to come up with vehicles that allow folks to get, like, intermodal transportation to get to where they need to work and to thrive, like, what are we doing? Like, what's the point in all of that?
Yeah. Great idea. Interesting. That's interesting. I like it.
Mhm.
Huh.
But let me be clear. I'm not saying the automobile industry should fail.
No, no.
But
What you're saying is, at least from how I understand it, is that it has to be integrated across all of the different businesses,
Mhm.
right? Like, I feel like it's almost like all all the businesses should work together
Yeah.
somehow to make it more efficient, because, like you said, it's almost like it almost gets to a death, but somehow it gets resuscitated.
Mhm.
But then it's like, how are we actually moving humanity forward? How are we moving
Right.
innovation forward? And can we all come together and figure out how we can actually sustain this for a long time?
Yeah. I think they're in a wonderful power position.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they don't realize the power that they have to
Hmm.
change the world. I
Yeah.
wish it was thought of differently, but we're in a capitalistic society as well. So I understand that.
Well, maybe someone will be listening to this, and maybe our conversation will spark some ideas.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Or
So we're
anger.
coming. What'd you say?
I said, or anger.
There is that too, but I think if we as a society can learn to harness anger,
Mhm. Right.
then I
Into
think we
action.
can, yes, into action. Then I think we can have better conversations.
Very true.
Um, so, closing segment,
Mm.
we are almost halfway through this decade.
Oh gosh.
I know, I know. What excites you the most about the future?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I try not to everything changes so quickly. I bought the other day Plod. I don't know if you are
Ah,
familiar with it. It's like a
yes.
little, yeah, this little bullet. I don't think I brought it with me. Because when I walk, I get a lot of ideas, and it's not like I'm going to be able to, like, write them down. So I had heard on a podcast that somebody was using Plod to write down their notes and to have them transcribed and to use AI tools to help identify, like, what's good, what's garbage, how to move forward. And what excites me about the future is that, I'm one of those people that my mind works faster
Mm,
than I can even comprehend a lot of things. Like, I mean, everyone's does, but I'm cognizant of how fast it's running. And I can't remember the things that I wanted to capture. when I need to capture it. I really have task fatigue all the time because I'm remembering things for myself, my company, my husband, my children, my friends, my organizations. It's just a lot. So I look forward to in the future an opportunity, because I see it, to capitalize and capture all of these ideas and see how I can really move forward exponentially and not just relying on the limits of my human brain, but harnessing the power of technology to help me get there. So that I'm very interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. And how are you finding Claude and compared to maybe, do you also use Chat GPT?
So I was talking the tool. I use Claude all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and so to answer your question, I use Claude. I like it. It's a little more natural language
Mm.
for me, just
Yes, me
personally, the way
too.
that I communicate. Chat GPT kind of felt like the Wild West because some of the stuff I was like, huh? So I felt like the hallucinations, and maybe that was just the version that I was using, was
Mm.
a little bit, there were a little too many hallucinations.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's gotten better since. But the tool that I'm using is called Plod, like Applaud,
Oh, yeah.
P-A-U-D. A friend of mine had one in the back of his phone to record conversations, but then they came up with I think it's called the pin. And it's like, looks like a little, like a giant medicine capsule, and you can wear it on around your neck or on your wrist. And it's still just a toy for me right now.
Huh.
Um, and I'm using it as a voice recorder in the sense, but my friends are like, well, now, you can do that on your iPhone. I was like, yeah, I don't want to hold my phone while I'm walking around. Like, this thing is, I just press it and I can talk to
Yeah.
myself as I'm walking around. They're like, well, you can use your AirPod. Like, and obviously technology has gotten better since I got this, but
Hmm.
um, I'm just really excited at how much, I feel like we'll use more of our brains in the future. We'll have better ideas in the future because we'll all have these little assistants around
Yes.
that help us think through and process at a
Yes.
higher level, better rate.
Hmm. I like that. It's almost like a like the Google glasses, the Meta.
Mhm. Yeah,
But for those of us who don't wear glasses, they
right.
can use the pin.
Yeah, there you go.
Any other apps that you use? I'm curious to, enhance your productivity and your ability to create.
Um, what's interesting? My ability to, so I don't really create a lot these days. I think I've been spending a lot of time trying out a lot of the different AI tools to figure out what a good use case is within the company, because it's
Mm.
not um, something that people think of automatically. So right now, no, honestly, yeah, I wish I did. I'm trying to use tools to help clear out my email. It is like the worst place for me to even go to because I get stuck there. So I'm trying out different tools to see how I can, get rid of all the junk of people trying to sell me something, and really focus in on the actual questions that I need to get to. So more anything productivity wise is what I'm looking at right now. So if anyone has any ideas of productivity apps or tools, I would love to hear it.
Okay, that's good. I'll have to think because obviously I'm more on the financial services side.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. Maybe we
Mhm.
can compare notes.
Yes.
I got this from one of my favorite podcasters. Imagine it's your last day on earth many years from now, and
Mhm.
you've accomplished everything you've ever dreamed of. But for whatever reason, you have to take everything you have ever created in this lifetime with you, and nobody has access to any of the information anymore. But you get to leave behind three truths, three lessons that you want to leave with the world.
Ooh.
What are your three truths?
Three truths or lessons. And I've created these things,
Yes.
right? Okay. Um,
No, in other words, like you've not created these things. You Everything you've ever created, ElectroSoft, your children,
Yes.
nobody will remember any of that, and no one will have access to any information stored
Mhm.
anywhere. What are the three truths that
That,
you want to leave with the world?
geez. Well, as a mom, I feel like terrible if I didn't say my kids. So I feel like that should be like a freebie, like the kids thing. Like, yes. But the truth, um, that my family business, we created a legacy, business, a piece of history in being, a Black owned electronics company, like in the tech hardware, because there's not, I think for young people, that whole mantra of you can, if you see it, you can be it, is so important. And I want to be able to make sure that that is a part of someone's story, what part of the reason why I wrote the book. So maybe, yeah, the book is another one that I wrote. That would be the second thing. Um, and I guess the last thing is just trying to that we lived authentically. I think
Mm.
oftentimes the freedom that owning your own business offers you is that you really do speak for yourself. I can be authentic in every situation that I'm in because I'm not representing a company. I'm not worried about a company letting me go because they didn't like something that I posted. Now, obviously, your customers can fire you for whatever, but for the most part, we try to always be authentic. And and I think that's, I'm so blessed to have that family business because I was able to see authenticity with my father and how he was and how he expressed himself, which in turn allowed me to do the same thing. And I think my children have seen the same thing. So, yeah, the authenticity.
I like that. So the first truth is if you see it, you can be it.
Yeah. So, like the history. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. You talked about your book. I'm going to come back to that. And the I would say the second is live authentically.
Yes.
So if you wrote this amazing book, by the way, which is called Dark, Dirty, Dangerous,
Hmm.
The Vibrant Future of Manufacturing.
Hmm.
If that book was not here and no one had access to it, was out of print, not on PDF, not on Creative Commons,
Right.
what is the one truth that you would want some that you would distill for that from that for
Yeah.
someone to remember you?
Um, that we were in as people of color, we can do anything. We can go into careers that, I guess this is just a takeoff of you can see it and you can be it, but more so that, even if no one looks like you in
Mm,
there and you can't see it, you can still be it.
I like that. Yeah, that's an important message, especially for the younger generation.
Hmm.
Now, because I mean, I've worked in corporate America, so have you.
Hmm.
And oftentimes I'm the only, female, Black, African, Nigerian,
Hmm.
um,
Everything.
whatever it is.
Mhm. Yeah.
And because I didn't see anybody else like me, it never stopped me from being it,
Right.
from being that person that I want to be, that investment banker or that entrepreneur or that venture capitalist, whatever title. Just because I didn't see it doesn't mean that I couldn't be it. So I do like that message.
But imagine how many people don't have the confidence, the support system, the education, the wherewithal to even dream about
Mm.
being anything more than they see on a day-to-day basis. And like how hard it is to escape that. I have family members that even though they see what we've done, still don't see that for themselves.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Well, that's definitely a lot of nuggets here that we've shared. Um, what drove you to write the book?
Um, so there's not a lot of manufacturing books that have moved me ever.
Mm,
And so the thought of writing a thought leadership book in manufacturing sounded absolutely terrible to me. And so I said that I would like to tell a story that the backdrop happens to be manufacturing. And there's so many life lessons that a lot of people can take from it, family business lessons, family interactions. And there's just so many things that folks that you don't have to be in manufacturing or have a family business for it to resonate. And so my goal was to tell a story that was honest and to talk about manufacturing, talk about being a person of color. I think that not that doesn't make me any special than anyone else. I think we need more stories
mm,
of people and living their lives in the way that they do to help heal, share, motivate others. I think so many times we feel like we're the craziest person in the room. We're going through the most tragic or the most ridiculous things at times, but it takes talking and learning from other people to make you feel better. Other people's stories are like the salve that gets you through life many times. And I hoped that this book could be that for a lot of people. So that really was my why, to really help other people more so than anything with a lot of information about manufacturing and logistics in the book, but it really takes you through um, honest situations that we faced as a family business.
right. And how is the relationship with your father right now,
It's
with considering
great.
the transition?
It's great. He's retired fully, and he doesn't even come to board meetings at this point.
Good for him.
Yeah, he travels the world, and like I texted him today about something about his American Express card. Like we're and when he's around, everything is great. Right now, I don't know where he is in the world, but I love that he's able to enjoy his life. You know, one thing I had said on stage at uh, the Family Business Magazine event that I'm glad we did not wait to take over
Mm,
for him to relinquish the role. Oftentimes, family businesses, the elder, that generation does not want to let go because that's their baby, or they don't know what they're going to do, or they're afraid that their lives will have no meaning because it's no longer attached to the business, or they have to face their own mortality, just so many different things. And what happened for us was that when my dad and I signed the papers later that year, my mother found out that she had cancer. And because my dad and I had done the transition, he was able to take her to all of her doctor's appointments and sit with her through chemo and all the things. They traveled when she was not on a chemo cycle. They spent a lot of time, and knowing that how bad it was. So we didn't know how bad it was until the end, but they knew, and they were able to have all the conversations that one would love to have with a loved one, knowing that they were coming to the end of life. And so I always tell people, like, you never know when the end is. So we always start with the end in mind. We would like to get, I would like to transition the business at a certain point in time. But I don't want to hang on to it by my toenails because I'm not willing to move on. And I'm so happy that my parents were mindful of that, so that when my mom did pass away, my dad was able to focus on that. I was still focused on the business, but there was nothing like left undone. And
right.
we were able to coach another family business through the same thing. And the father passed away 2 months later. So there's just, I think timing is just such a huge thing. You don't know what tomorrow has for you. So I always say start with the end in mind. And I'm just really happy that he's able to continue his life now that my mother's transitioned. and still enjoy. It's not what he envisioned, but at
Right.
least they had 2.5 years of
Mm.
travel and time together, and having all those conversations.
I wasn't expecting the conversation to go here. I just feel like I could spend another hour with you on this topic because, as an M&A advisor, and not just for family businesses, but more so for them, there's this push and pull between transitioning while the patriarchy or the matriarchy or the matriarch is actually still alive
Yeah.
and wanting to hold on to the business to the very end without really putting a real full blown transition plan in place.
Hmm.
And then sometimes, things happen, things go bump in the night.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that family business, because there wasn't any planning. So it just really becomes fraught and contentious. And then the tax planning,
Yeah.
I mean, that comes around that. So yeah, it's a lot to unpack. Maybe I should bring you back just for a family business podcast episode because there's so many different layers. It's
You
unimaginable.
definitely need to do that, because
Yeah.
even if it's not a family business, it's any person thinking, my dad could have been in a position where like nobody wanted to take over and he had to sell it. We're like,
Yeah.
you need to sell this. And he just didn't want to. Then now we have to deal with it. Like that conversation of
Oh,
what
I've had that conversation.
I'm sure you have. It's so important that business owners do not start with the end in mind.
Right. Yeah, and they don't. They do the business plan though,
Yeah,
and start the business, but then everything else sort of goes to the wayside.
it sure
Yeah,
does.
we should just get you on here maybe sometime in the summer if you have some time.
Absolutely. That
Yeah.
is. Mm.
And also because Babson, where I went for my MBA,
Mhm.
is a huge family business, even though they do ventures and startup ventures,
Mhm.
but they are known for family businesses. They actually have multi-generational courses
Oh
where
yeah.
they bring in the family businesses from around the world and kind of sort of hash out like situations or transition issues or operational issues. So you talk about the Family Business Magazine. I think that we have to bring you back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've a friend of mine, she's a chief of staff for a family office, and she deals in that realm as well. She went to Cornell, and so
Mhm.
Cornell has family business
Yes.
courses as well. I know that St. Joseph's University does as well. And I was like, I wish I had known these things. Like, I think I would have probably gotten one of my degrees somewhere where I could have experienced some of those courses.
Yes. Yes. We should do that and maybe even have it as a panel. I'd love to have
That
her
would be,
on with
yeah,
you.
she's
So then
awesome.
so we can definitely piggyback. That would be nice.
Mhm.
Okay, what is your definition of a next gen industrialist?
So with my position as the co-chair of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Manufacturing Alliance, one of the things that when we were discussing how labor is such an issue right now, and
Mm.
it's always been an issue, the thought was, why don't we bring in Drexel's Solutions Institute to see if because they run like a consulting team guided by the university, and find out who we should be targeting. Like, why is it that we are having such a hard time with finding these folks?
Mm.
And they said the people you should be looking for are women, people of color, and immigrants. And which is kind of the antithetical target market of manufacturing in general. And
Especially with innovation.
exactly. And so since then, I feel like I have a little bit of a cheat sheet knowing that the next gen is that. And when I picture that, whatever next gen, I'm always picturing women, people of color, and immigrants.
Mhm.
It's transformed how we target and market open positions. I mean, it's open to everyone, but if we know that these are folks, because of the research that we've paid for, are most inclined to be interested in these types of careers, those are the folks that we have now targeted. And I think that it's just when you are a person of color, you're a woman, you're an immigrant, you're always being counted out. You're always, all the good things are not being always offered to you. So you're more inclined to lean into opportunities that you may not have thought of.
Yeah.
And I think that's why not just manufacturing, just next gen is going to look very female, of color, and immigrants. They're going to be a huge part of that.
Do you know, he's on LinkedIn. His name is Drew Crow.
I do know Drew. He is so dope.
He's the dopest manufacturing renaissance expert.
Yes. Yes, he is.
Okay, so you know him because he's really at the forefront of this future of work, educating manufacturing leaders. And he actually also came to this conclusion that I guess Drexel University also came to. So I think that's someone that you should definitely pull in.
Yeah,
to help you with that.
Yeah.
I had to go on and look him up and just make sure that that I was given the right information. So
yeah. Drew is amazing. We had a brief online texting thing about a potential idea that I had. So yeah, absolutely. He's the best.
Good. Okay, good. So you're in good hands.
Yes, absolutely. Uh-huh.
That's awesome. Okay, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. Karla with a K, Trotman. Not, I say trot as a horse, not trout like the fish. ElectroSoftInc.com is our website for the company. I am on Instagram. I don't think you're really going to get what you want off of me in Instagram because I'm still something I don't really understand that well. I mean, I get it. It's pictures, but
Yeah.
And the book is available at all online book retailers. I'd love to hear if you have some ideas and give me some feedback, give me some tools. Have something I say you want more information or sparked your interest, I'd love to chat.
Yeah. And also, what kind of customers are you looking for?
So we do very well in like industrial and defense. We do printed circuit board assemblies, cable assemblies, wiring harnesses, box build, and panels. We are looking for companies that have high mix, lower volume. So we don't do iPhones and a lot of high volume items. We really focus in on the industrial marketplace. We are in automated guided vehicles, defense work as far as cables, panels, boards. We really can build anything. I'd say we're industry agnostic, but people always like to know what you build. But most of our companies are people that folks have never heard of. They're in particle analyzing equipment. They're in traffic signaling, a lot of different industries.
Okay. That's good. I just had a thought. All right. So I put your website. Is this correct?
That is correct.
ElectroSoftInc.com.
Yes.
Karla, this has been amazing. One thing is clear to me: manufacturing isn't just surviving; it's actually transforming. And your book, Dark, Dirty, and Dangerous. This is the moment. The future of American manufacturing isn't just about machines and AI. It's about visionaries like yourself who are ready to roll up their sleeves and reimagine what's possible. So people can connect with Karla, as she said, on LinkedIn to learn more about electronics manufacturing innovation at their website. Plus, if you just want to get a sense of what the day-to-day function is, operation is around manufacturing. I would definitely recommend reading her book. She shares a lot of insights, not only about the day-to-day operations, but then what it really takes to run a family-owned business and transition a family-owned business. I'm going to plug in show notes for details. Carla actually also said they do sometimes offer facility tours at their Pennsylvania location. So we'll put the details below. And then there's the upcoming manufacturing day, which is sometime in October, that they actually also have like a whole day type of programming around that. So don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more conversations with industrial innovators who are building tomorrow's economy today, like Carla. Share this episode with someone who thinks manufacturing is a thing of the past. They just might see the future differently. Next week, we are going to dive into the topic of growth equity with Dan Lubeck of Solis Capital, which I'm really excited to talk about. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Take care. Carla, just 1 second. Let me sign off the end.